Here's what they didn't tell you about the Toys R Us closings and how it ties back to President Trump. When America's largest retail toy store announced last week that it would close its U.S. locations, everyone blamed Amazon and Walmart. They told us Toys R Us didn't invest in making its stores fun or competing online. And that's true. But why didn't they? After all, last year, Toys R Us made more than $350 million, but reported a loss of $29 million. So where did it all go? To understand that, you have to go back 13 years, when Toys R Us was bought by a group of 3 companies. Buying Toys R Us cost $6.6 billion, but those 3 companies only put up $1.3 billion. They borrowed the rest, and then they handed those IOUs to Toys R Us. In other words, they borrowed more than $5 billion to buy Toys R Us, and then told Toys R Us to pay off the debt. The store has been trying to do so ever since. Toys R Us has been paying $400 million every year on those debts, more than it can invest in its stores or its website. Without that $400 million every year, Toys R Us would have been in the black last year. And you should know that the 3 companies that set this all up were Bain Capital, Vornado Realty, and the investment firm Kohlberg Kravis Roberts, otherwise known as KKR. To be clear, none of this is Mr. Trump's fault. But when you hear him talk about creating jobs and keeping stores open, you should know that the people around President Trump are very much the people making jobs in stores go away. The most famous of them is a co-founder of Bain Capital, former Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney, whom President Trump has recently endorsed for Senate in Utah. If Vornado Realty is actually a business partner of President Trump, its billionaire CEO is Stephen Roth, a Trump advisor who has teamed up for decades on real estate deals with Trump. And then there's Mr. Henry Kravis, the billionaire head of KKR. Henry Kravis isn't just a fan of President Trump. He gave $1 million to the Trump inauguration. More importantly, President Trump wanted to nominate the man who saddled Toys R Us with crushing debt, Mr. Kravis, to serve as America's Treasury Secretary. Folks, it's not just Toys R Us, and it's not just Trump. Republicans and Democrats alike have rewritten the rules of our economy so that now 40% of every retailer that goes under is owned in part by private equity firms like the ones that own Toys R Us. By putting the price of losing on us, we have freed up a handful of investor billionaires to gamble on our economy, playing with our lives in the process. At Toys R Us alone, it'll mean more than 800 stores closing, 33,000 jobs gone, at a company that's making money. So, the real problem isn't Toys R Us. The problem is that in the new economy, we are toys.